allowance is only permitted in school books. No engineer would dream of allowing anything of the kind. I've projected many miles of railways and many more of canals, and the allowance has not even been thought of, much less allowed for. This allowance for curvature means this, that it is 8 inches for the first mile of a canal and increasing at the ratio by the square of the distance in miles. Thus a small navigable canal for boats, say 30 miles long, will have, by the above rule, an allowance for curvature of 600 feet. Think of that, and then please credit engineers as not being quite such fools. Nothing of the sort is allowed. We no more think of allowing 600 feet for a line of 30 miles of railway or canal than of wasting our time trying to square the circle. The London and Northwestern Railway forms a straight line 180 miles long between London and Liverpool. The railroad's highest point midway at Birmingham Station is only 240 feet above sea level. The road were actually a globe, however, curving 8 inches per mile square. The 180-mile stretch of rail would form an arc with the center point at Birmingham raised over a mile, a full 5,400 feet above London and Liverpool. 11. A surveyor and engineer of 30 years published in the Birmingham Weekly Mercury stated, "I am thoroughly acquainted with the theory and practice of civil engineering. However bigoted some of our professors may be in the theory of surveying, according to the prescribed rules, yet it is well known amongst us that such theoretical measurements are incapable of any practical illustration. All our locomotives are designed to run on what may be regarded as true levels or flats.
Hi
There are,
everybody,
of course,
if you're
partial
on.
inclines or
Hello?
gradients here and there, but they are always accurately defined and must be carefully traversed. But anything approaching to 8 inches in the mile, increasing as the square of the distance, could not be worked by any engine that was ever yet constructed. Taking one station with another, all over England and Scotland, it may be stated that all the platforms are on the same relative level. The distance between eastern and western coasts of England may be set down as 300 miles. If the prescribed curvature was indeed as represented, the central stations at Rugby or Warwick ought to be close upon 3 miles higher than a cord drawn from the two extremities. If such was the case, there is not a driver or stoker within the kingdom that would be found to take charge of the train. We can only laugh at those of your readers who seriously give us credit for such venturesome exploits as running trains round spherical curves. Horizontal curves on levels are dangerous enough. Vertical curves would be 1,000 times worse, and with our rolling stock constructed as at present, physically impossible. 12. The Manchester Ship Canal Company published in the Earth Review stated, "It is customary in railway and canal constructions for all levels."
So we're just going to weed this area here and then be done?
Horizontal, and is so shown on all sections. It is not the practice in laying out public works to make allowances for the curvature of the earth. 13. In a 19th century French experiment by M.M. and Arago, a powerful lamp with good reflectors was placed on the summit of Desierto Las Palmas in Spain and able to be seen all the way from Capri on the island of Ibiza. Since the elevation of the 2 points were identical and the distance between covered nearly 100 miles, if the Earth were a ball 25,000 miles in circumference, the light should have been more than 6,600 feet, a mile and a quarter, below the line of sight. 14. The Lieutenant Colonel Portlock experiment used oxyhydrogen Drummond's lights and heliostats to reflect the sun's rays across stations set up across 108 miles of St. George's Channel. If the Earth were actually a ball 25,000 miles in circumference, Portlock's light should have remained hidden under 1.5 miles of curvature. 15. If the Earth were truly a sphere 25,000 miles in circumference, airplane pilots would have to constantly correct their altitudes downwards so as to not fly.
Has anybody heard from Pilot LX? Anybody heard from Pilot LX?
Their altitude at a typical cruising speed of 500 miles per hour would have to constantly dip their nose downwards and descend 2,777 feet over half a mile every minute. Otherwise, without compensation, in 1 hour's time, the pilot would find themselves 31.5 miles higher than expected. 16. The experiment known as Airy's failure proved that stars move relative to a stationary Earth and not the other way around. By first filling a telescope with water to slow down the speed of light inside, Then, calculating the tilt necessary to get the starlight directly down the tube, Airy failed to prove the heliocentric theory, since the starlight was already coming in the correct angle with no change necessary, and instead proved the geocentric model correct. 70. Olber's paradox states that if there were billions of stars, which are suns, the night sky would be filled completely with light. As Edgar Allan Poe said, were the succession of stars endless, then the background of the sky would present us a uniform luminosity, since there could exist absolutely no point in all that background at which would not exist a star. In fact, Olber's paradox is no more a paradox than George Airy's experiment was a failure. Both are actually excellent refutations of the heliocentric spinning ball.
He just said yo twice. Yo, yo.
18.
Yo-yo ma.
Middleton, Morley, and Sagnac experiments attempted to measure the change in speed of light due to Earth's assumed motion through space. After measuring in every possible different direction in various locations, they failed to detect any significant change whatsoever, again proving the stationary geocentric model. 19. Tycho Brahe famously argued against the heliocentric theory in his time, positing that if the Earth revolved around the Sun, the change in relative position of the stars after 6 months' orbital motion could not fail to be seen. He argued that the stars should seem to separate as we approach and come together as we recede. In actual fact, however, after 190 million miles of supposed orbit around the Sun, not a single inch of parallax can be detected in the stars, proving that we have not moved at all. 20. If Earth were truly constantly spinning eastwards at over 1,000 miles per hour, vertically fired cannonballs and other projectiles should fall significantly due west. In actual fact, however, when this has been tested, vertically fired cannonballs shoot upwards an average of 14 seconds ascending, 14 seconds descending, and fall back to the ground no more than 2 feet away from the cannon, often directly back into the muzzle. 21.
Wow, did you hear that, man? A cannonball can be fired up in the air and it'll land right back in the muzzle. How can you do that on a rotating Earth?
Surface of the Earth and wait for their destinations to come to them.
That's very interesting.
22. If Earth were truly constantly spinning eastward at over 1,000 miles per hour, during the Red Bull stratosphere dive, Felix Baumgartner, spending 3 hours ascending over New Mexico, should have landed 2,500 miles west into the Pacific Ocean, but instead landed a few dozen miles east of the takeoff point. 23. Ball believers often claim gravity magically and inexplicably drags the entire lower atmosphere of the Earth in perfect synchronization up to some undetermined height, where this progressively faster spinning atmosphere gives way to the non-spinning, non-gravitized, non-atmosphere of infinite vacuum space. Such nonsensical theories
I really like this
however,
paper.
by rain, fireworks,
Awesome.
birds, bugs,
Can go on multiple layers and multiple levels.
All of which would behave
I'm
very
loving
differently if both the ball Earth and its atmosphere were constantly
Thank you, Brother Matt.
at 1,000 miles per hour.
Alright, so this is what we have. Can you see it, Heather?
We're constantly spinning eastward over 1,000 miles per hour.
We've got one more to
Then
look at right there on that
north-south
S.
cannons should establish a control, while east-firing cannonballs should fall significantly farther than all others, while west-firing cannonballs should
And on this one I can do the color in either
in actual fact,
blue or black. So everybody, we're going to let you choose real quick.
the distance covered.
This is a shirt that is going out on our
25.
public
If Earth
free
and its
lunch
atmosphere
program.
are
Had to bring the
constantly
camera
spinning
over
eastwards
here.
over 1,000 miles per hour, and the average commercial airliner traveling 500 miles per hour should never be able to reach its eastward destinations before they come speeding up from behind. Likewise, westward destinations should be arrived at thrice the speed, but this is not the case. 26.
Alright, so
Quoted
you have the light blue shirt there,
If
everybody.
flying had been invented
Or,
at the time of Copernicus,
let's try it on the
no doubt
black
that he
shirt.
would have soon realized
And then I'll let
his
you guys
contention regarding the
decide
rotation of the Earth
which
was
you
wrong,
think
on
should
account
go
of the
on
relation
this
existing between the speed of an aircraft and that of
garment.
the Earth's
And this, of
rotation.
course, is
If
what
the
it would
Earth
look like on the
rotates,
black
as it
shirt.
said,
So white or black? What do you think, everybody?
and a plane flies in the same direction
Or
at
anyone?
500 miles,
White
it is
or
obvious
black?
that its place of destination will be farther removed every minute.
Okay, I'm just going to say I kind of like it better on blue, but what do you think, Heather?
Yep.
Noticeability-wise?
1,500
I like the blue.
miles
The
would
blue?
be covered
Okay,
in
we're going to go ahead and
instead
press
of
the blue down then.
since the speed of the rotation is to be added to that of the plane. It could also be pointed out that such a
you have
flying
my
speed
tape?
of
Did we
1,000
use
miles
it
an
anywhere
hour,
to find
which
it?
is supposed to be that of the
The
Earth's
roller
rotation, has
The
recently been
roller,
achieved,
the roller tape
so that an
Yeah, you're
aircraft
rolling
flying
over
at this
in
rate
there.
in the same
Which way?
direction as that of the rotation
Okay.
could not cover any ground at all. It would remain suspended in midair over the spot from which it took off, since both speeds are equal. 27. If Earth and its atmosphere were constantly spinning eastwards over 1,000 miles per hour, landing airplanes on such fast-moving runways, which face all manner of directions, north, south, east, west, and otherwise,
Would you
would be
have to fold that in
practically
half?
impossible.
I will here in
Yet,
just a
in
moment.
reality,
Yeah.
such fictional concerns are completely negligible. 28. If the Earth and its atmosphere were constantly spinning eastwards over 1,000 miles per hour, then clouds, wind, and weather patterns could not casually and unpredictably go every which way, with clouds often traveling in opposing directions at varying altitudes simultaneously. 29. If the Earth and its atmosphere were constantly spinning eastwards over 1,000 miles per hour, this should somewhere, somehow be seen, heard, felt, or measured by someone, yet no one in history has ever experienced this alleged eastward motion. Meanwhile, however, we can hear, feel, and experimentally measure even the slightest westward breeze. 30. In his book, South Sea Voyages, Arctic and
That's going to be an
Antarctic
issue for
explorer
me right
Sir
there.
James
I'm
Clark
clearing that
Ross
right now.
described his experience on the night
So
of
I'm gonna
November
fix that
27,
problem.
1839, and his conclusion that the Earth must be motionless. The sky being very clear, it enabled us to observe the higher stratum of clouds to be moving in an exactly opposite direction to that of the wind. A circumstance
magnet
which is
has some
recorded
dust
in
on
the
it, so-
Meteorological Journal, both in the northeast and southeast trades, and has also often been observed by former voyagers. Captain Cecil Hall witnessed it from the summit of the Peak of Tenerife, and Count Strzelecki.
I did not realize that it was, the press was turned in a program mode.
In Oahe, reached
So
at
it'll take me just a
4,000
few seconds to get that back up to temperature.
above that of the trade wind, and experienced the influence of an opposite current of air of a different hydrometric and thermometric condition. Count Strzelecki.
Strzelecki.
Of the
Count Strzelecki.
seemingly anomalous circumstance that at the height of 6,000 feet, he found the current of air blowing at right angles to both the lower strata, also of a different thermometric
Count
condition
Strzelecki.
than the interstratum. Such a state of the atmosphere is compatible with the fact which other evidence has demonstrated that the Earth is at rest. 31.
Bingo.
Quoting Zetetic Cosmogony, Thomas Winship states, "Let imagination picture to the mind what force air would have which was set in motion by a spherical body of 8,000 miles in diameter, which in 1 hour was spinning round 1,000 miles per hour, rushing through space at 65,000 miles per hour, and gyrating across the heavens. Then let conjecture endeavor to discover whether the inhabitants on such a globe could keep their hair on. If the Earth globe rotates on...
How you doing, everybody? We'll just go ahead and bring it back over here.
miles per hour, such an immense mass would have necessitated
Hello, Andrew.
a tremendous rush of wind in the
Just getting this done, and then we're going to hit
the wind
the road. We got some places to go.
anything like clouds which got within the sphere of influence of the rotating sphere would have to
No,
be
that's
the same.
a polyester
The
brown
Earth
shirt.
is at rest is proved by kite flying. 32. If gravity is credited with being a force strong enough to hold
My
the
gravity
oceans,
cost.
buildings, people, and atmosphere stuck to the surface of a rapidly spinning ball, then it is impossible for gravity to also simultaneously be weak enough to allow little birds, bugs, and planes to take off and travel freely, unabated in any direction. 33. If gravity is credited with being a force strong enough to curb the massive expanse of oceans around a globular Earth, it would be impossible for fish and other creatures to swim through such forcefully held water. 34. Ship captains, in navigating great distances at sea, never need to factor the supposed curvature of the Earth into their calculations. Both plain sailing and great circle sailing, the most popular navigation methods, use plane, not spherical trigonometry, making all mathematical calculations on the assumption that the Earth is perfectly flat. If the Earth were in fact a sphere, such an errant assumption would lead to constantly glaring inaccuracies. Plain sailing has worked perfectly fine in both theory and practice for thousands of years, however, and plane trigonometry has time and again proven more accurate than spherical trigonometry in determining distances across the ocean. 35. If the Earth were truly a globe, then every line of latitude south of the equator would have to measure a gradually smaller and smaller circumference as farther south travel. If, however, the Earth is an extended
South of the
then every
equator.
line of latitude south of the equator should measure a gradually larger and larger circumference the farther south travel. The fact that many captains navigating south of the equator, assuming the globular theory, have found themselves drastically out of reckoning, more so the farther south traveled, testifies to the fact that Earth is not a ball. 36. During Captain James Clark Ross's voyages around the Antarctic circumference, he often wrote in his journal, perplexed at how they routinely found themselves out of accordance with their charts, stating that they found themselves an average of 12 to 16 miles outside their reckoning every day, later on further south as much as 29 miles. 37. Lieutenant Charles Wilkes commanded a United States Navy exploration expedition to the Antarctic from 1838 to 1842, and in his journals also mentioned being consistently east of his reckoning, sometimes over 20 miles in less than 18 hours. 38. To quote Reverend Thomas Milner, in the southern hemisphere, navigators to India have often fancied themselves east of the Cape when still west, and have been driven ashore on the African coast, which, according to their reckoning, lay behind them. This misfortune happened to a fine frigate, the Challenger, in 1845. How came Her Majesty's ship Conqueror to be lost? How have so many other noble vessels, perfectly sound, perfectly manned, perfectly navigated, been wrecked in calm weather, not only in dark night or in a fog, but in broad daylight and sunshine? In the former case, upon the coasts, in the latter upon sunken rocks, from being out of reckoning?
I did not realize I just crashed in on Heather.
39.
Okay. We're almost done here, everybody. That's the last one we've got to go.
Shippers and Importers Directory state that the straight line distance between Sydney and Nelson is 1,550 statute miles. Their given difference in longitude is 22 degrees, 2 minutes, and 14 seconds. Therefore, if 22 degrees, 2 minutes, 14 seconds out of 360 is 1,550 miles, the entirety would measure 25,182 miles. This is not only larger than the ball Earth is said to be at the equator, but a whole 4,262 miles greater than it would be at Sydney's southern latitude on a globe of said proportions. 40. From near Cape Horn, Chile, to Port Phillip in Melbourne, Australia, the distance is 10,500 miles, or 143 degrees of longitude away. Factoring in the remaining degrees to 360 makes for a total distance of 26,430 miles around this particular latitude, which is over 1,500 miles wider than the Earth is supposed to be at the equator, and many more thousands of miles wider than it is supposed to be at such southern latitudes. 41. Similar calculations made from the Cape of Good Hope, South Africa to Melbourne, Australia, at an average latitude of 35.5 degrees south, have given an approximate figure of over 25,000 miles, which is again equal to or greater than the Earth's supposed greatest circumference at the equator. Calculations from Sydney, Australia to Wellington, New Zealand, at an average of 37.5 degrees south, have given an approximate circumference of 25,500 miles, greater still. According to the ball Earth theory, the circumference of the Earth at 37.5 degrees southern latitude should be only 19,757 statute miles, almost 6,000 miles less than such practical measurements. 42. In the ball Earth model, Antarctica is an ice continent which covers the bottom of the ball from 78 degrees south latitude to 90, and is therefore not more than 12,000 miles in circumference.
That's a pretty shirt you have on.
Cook and James Clark Ross, however,
see Heather's shirt, everybody?
Antarctic circumnavigation took 3 to 4 years and clocked 50 to 60,000 miles around. The British ship Challenger also made an indirect but complete circumnavigation of Antarctica, traversing 69,000 miles. This is entirely inconsistent with the ball model. 43. If Earth was a ball, there are several flights in the southern hemisphere which would have their quickest, straightest path over the Antarctic continent, such as Santiago, Chile, to Sydney, Australia, Instead of taking the shortest, quickest route in a straight line over Antarctica, all such flights detour all manner of directions away from Antarctica, instead claiming the temperature's too cold for airplane travel over Antarctica, and NASA claims
This will be ready to press here in just a few seconds.
both far colder and far hotter than any experienced on Earth. Such an excuse is clearly just an excuse, and these flights are made because they are impossible. 44. If Earth was a ball, and Antarctica was too cold to fly over, the only logical way to fly from Sydney to Santiago would be a straight shot over the Pacific, staying in the southern hemisphere the entire way. Refueling could be done in New Zealand or other southern hemisphere destinations along the way, if absolutely necessary. In actual fact, however, Santiago to Sydney flights go into the northern hemisphere, making stopovers at LAX and other North American airports before continuing back down to the southern hemisphere.
Yeah, they can't get there.
Such ridiculously wayward detours make no sense on the globe, but make perfect sense. And
Well, they don't even work on a globe.
shown on a flat Earth
That's
map.
kind of what's always blown my mind.
45. On a ball Earth, Johannesburg, South Africa to Perth, Australia should be a straight shot over the Indian Ocean, with convenient refueling possibilities on Mauritius or Madagascar.
Over the
In actual
engines.
practice, however, most Johannesburg to Perth flights curiously stop over either in Dubai, Hong Kong, or
Like, you
Malaysia,
cannot say
all of which make
engines.
no sense on the ball, but are completely understandable when mapped on a flat Earth. 46. On a ball Earth, Cape Town, South Africa to Buenos Aires,
Cape
Argentina
Town,
should be a straight
South
shot over the
Africa.
Atlantic following
Who's
the
all
Cape
with us, I
Town
wonder?
But instead,
Hillary, how you doing, Hillary?
locations in the northern hemisphere
We're just
first,
trying to get this
jumping
done
over
and
anywhere from London to
get on to
Turkey
do the
Dubai.
rest of the things that we
Once
need
again,
to
these
do
make
today.
absolutely no
We
sense
already
on the globe,
hung out with
but
our
are
friend
completely
and brother
understandable
William.
since we're mapped on a flat Earth. 47. On a
Brother
ball,
William made a
Johannesburg,
vegan
South
taco,
Africa to Sao Paulo,
Yeah, that was
Brazil
cool,
should be
man.
a quick straight shot along the 25th
A
southern latitude.
vegan
But
taco.
instead, nearly every flight makes a refueling stop at the 50th degree north latitude.
Nathan, where on earth
The
is
only reason
Nathan
such a
Thompson?
ridiculous stopover works in reality is because the Earth is flat. 48.
Nathan broke his mug, so we got
Santiago,
Nathan
Johannesburg,
a
South
mug
Africa
going out and a
should
few
be
other
easy
things.
flight, all taking place below the Tropic of Capricorn in the southern hemisphere. Yet every listed flight makes
I
a
forgot what
curious
temperature I had
refueling
this
stop
on.
in
339, 340,
Senegal,
ready to
near the
go,
Tropic of Cancer
finally.
in the north hemisphere first.
Okay.
When mapped on a flat Earth, the reason why is clear to see.
There's
However,
one thing that I
Senegal
wanted
is
to do
actually
that I did
directly
not
in a
like.
straight line path halfway between the two.
Look at this
49.
here.
If Earth were a spinning ball heated by a sun 93 million miles away, it would be impossible to have simultaneously sweltering summers in Africa, while just a few thousand miles away, bone-chilling, frozen Arctic and Antarctic winters experiencing little to no heat from the sun whatsoever. If the heat from the sun traveled 93 million miles to the Sahara Desert, it is absurd to assert that another 4,000 miles, 0.00004%, further to Antarctica would completely negate such sweltering heat, resulting in such drastic differences. 50. If the Earth were truly a globe, the Arctic and Antarctic polar regions and areas of comparable latitude north and south of the equator should share similar conditions and characteristics, such as comparable temperatures, seasonal changes, length of daylight, plant and animal life. In reality, however, the Arctic and Antarctic regions and areas of comparable latitude north and south of the equator differ greatly.
You can wash this shirt indefinitely,
Model and entirely
many times as you need to. Just do not wash it
51.
within 24 hours.
Antarctica is by far the coldest place on Earth, with an average annual temperature of approximately minus 57 degrees Fahrenheit and a record low of minus 135.8. The average annual temperature at the North Pole, however, is a comparatively warm 4 degrees. Throughout the year, temperatures in the Antarctic vary less than half the amount at comparable Arctic latitudes. The northern Arctic region enjoys moderately warm summers and manageable winters, whereas the southern Antarctic region never even warms.
All right, take a look at this shirt, everybody.
Ice. On a tilting, wobbling ball Earth spinning uniformly around the sun, Arctic and Antarctic temperatures and seasons should not vary so greatly.
You want to turn it this way, Heather? Then get a look at what it.
Iceland, at 65 degrees.
This is a nice shirt, everybody. You definitely want to pick up this shirt.
Species of native plants and abundant various animal life. Compare this with the Isle of Georgia,
Beautiful.
just 54 degrees south latitude, where there are only 18 species of native plants and animal life is almost non-existent. The same latitude as Canada or England in the north, where dense forests of various tall trees abound, the infamous Captain Cook wrote of Georgia that he was unable to find a single shrub large enough to make a toothpick. Cook wrote, "Not a tree was to be seen. The lands which lie to the south are doomed by nature to perpetual frigidness, never to feel the warmth of the sun's rays, whose horrible and savage aspect I have not words to describe. Even marine life is sparse and certain.